The rain was a predictable, dreary curtain, just like the mournful faces of Mark's family. I stood a little apart from the rest of them, my black designer dress a stark contrast to their sad, practical clothes. A small, self-satisfied smile was hidden behind my hand as I watched the casket being lowered. Finally, it was over. The funeral of my husband, Mark, the end of his life, and the beginning of mine. I'd married Mark for security. He was kind, dependable, and most importantly, wealthy. Not a flamboyant, flashy kind of rich, but the old, comfortable money that meant beautiful homes, luxurious vacations, and no more worrying about bills. We'd had a good run, I suppose. He was devoted to me, and I was good at being his wife. But his sentimental nature always annoyed me. He collected relics from his past, things he claimed had meaning, things I saw as junk. As the mourners began to disperse, Mark's sister, Emily, approached the gravesite. Her face was red and blotchy from crying, and she clutched a worn-out, tarnished gold-plated watch in her hand. It was an old thing. The leather band cracked, the face scratched. I had seen it 1,000 times in a dusty box in Mark's study, and had repeatedly told him to throw it away. I walked over to her, a sneer on my lips. "Don't tell me you're getting sentimental over that old thing, Emily," I said, my voice dripping with disdain. "I told Mark to throw it away years ago. It's a cheap piece of junk." Emily looked up at me, her brown eyes filled with a fresh wave of tears. "This was Dad's," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Mark loved it. It's not about the value, Sarah. It's about the memories." "Memories don't pay the bills, Emily," I scoffed, turning on my heel. "Mark may have been a good man, but he was sentimental to a fault. That watch is worthless, just like a lot of his other things." I walked away, leaving her standing alone, a small figure of grief clinging to a useless trinket. I couldn't help but laugh, a small, triumphant sound that was swallowed by the dreary afternoon. Weeks later, the reality of my new life was settling in. I was alone in our huge, modern house in the suburbs, surrounded by Mark's things. I was sorting through his study, impatiently tossing books and old clothes into garbage bags, when I found a small, locked wooden box. It was hidden behind a stack of old files, intricate carvings of swirling leaves and vines adorning its surface. It was the only thing I saw that felt different. I couldn't find a key, so I put it aside, assuming it held some silly keepsake. The day of the will reading arrived, and I was dressed for success, confident in the future I had envisioned for myself. I sat across from Emily in the lawyer's sterile office, a cool smile on my face. She looked tired and sad, still mourning her brother. I, on the other hand, was ready to claim what was mine. The lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Mr. Thompson, cleared his throat and began to read. My smile faded as he spoke. He detailed the division of Mark's assets, the house, the cars, the bank accounts, but instead of leaving them to me, Mark had put them all into a trust. I was a beneficiary, but with a catch. I was to receive a monthly stipend, but only to maintain the property and pay for its upkeep. A portion of the inheritance was also designated for a local animal shelter and a children's charity, both causes Mark had supported. And then, the final blow, the rest of his personal belongings, including the watch I had mocked, were bequeathed to Emily. "What? This is insane. I'm his wife. I should get everything," I yelled, my composure shattering. The lawyer calmly explained that Mark wanted to ensure his assets were used responsibly, and that his sister would manage the distribution of his personal items. He said Mark had entrusted her with his legacy, knowing she would do the right thing. My vision of a life of leisure was turning into a nightmare of paperwork and restrictions. I stormed out of the office, finding Emily waiting in the hallway. "You knew about this, didn't you? You tricked him," I snarled. Emily looked genuinely bewildered. "Sarah, I had no idea. Mark just told me he wanted me to have his personal things. He trusted me. He trusted you with a bunch of worthless junk." I spat, my voice filled with rage. Emily's face softened with pity. "He was worried, Sarah," she said softly. "He told me he felt like you only cared about his money." The words hit me hard, but I pushed the feeling away. It couldn't be true. I scoffed and walked away, a new feeling of unease settling in my stomach. The next few weeks were a brutal lesson in reality. The trust's first payment was a paltry sum, barely enough to cover the mortgage and the astronomical bills of the sprawling house. I had to make cuts, starting with my personal luxuries. I sold my designer bags, my expensive jewelry, and even my luxury car. I was a beneficiary of a multi-million-dollar trust, yet I felt poorer than ever. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. The house, once a symbol of my success, now felt like a gilded cage. Every room was a reminder of Mark and his carefully planned revenge. He had found a way to control me, even from beyond the grave. I spent my days in a frantic search for anything he might have hidden, anything of value not mentioned in the will. I tore through his study again, pulling out drawers, checking behind books, looking for a safe or a secret compartment. The only thing I kept coming back to was that small, locked wooden box. I shook it, but all I could hear was the faint rattle of something small inside. I was sure it was something valuable, something he had deliberately hidden from me. One day, Emily came by to pick up the rest of Mark's personal belongings. She looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and sorrow, as if she could see the slow-burning desperation in my eyes. I tried to act friendly. "Emily, listen. Maybe we could talk about the will. I'm having a hard time," I said, my voice softer than I intended. Her expression was firm. "I can't change what Mark wanted, Sarah. It's not my place. He made his wishes clear." She loaded a few boxes of old photo albums and books into her car. As she was leaving, she saw the wooden box on a table. "Oh, Mark wanted me to have that too," she said, reaching for it. "No," I said, my hand shooting out to stop her. "He didn't specify that in the will. It's not on the list of personal items." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Fine, but it's just a memory box, Sarah. I'm sure it's nothing." I didn't believe her. The way Mark had hidden it, the fact that it was locked, it had to be something. I felt a surge of triumph mixed with my despair. This box, I was sure, was my key to freedom. I became obsessed with the wooden box. I tried every key in the house. I tried to pry it open with a knife, but nothing worked. It was built with an intricate lock that resisted my every attempt. The more it resisted, the more certain I became that it held the key to my financial freedom. One evening, I received a message from Emily, asking me to come to her house. She said she had something she wanted to show me. Reluctantly, I agreed. I needed to keep up appearances, and maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to get her to change her mind about the will. Her house was modest, but it was filled with warmth and life. Photos of Mark and Emily as kids were everywhere. It was a stark contrast to my cold, sterile mansion. Emily led me to the living room and placed a familiar object on the table, the old watch. "I took it to a watchmaker," she said, her voice soft. "It wasn't working, and I wanted to get it fixed." "What for?" "It's worthless," I sneered, still unable to resist a jab. "Maybe not," she said, her eyes twinkling a little. "The watchmaker said it was a family heirloom. It's an old American brand, not famous or anything, but he said the mechanism was unique. He found a small hidden compartment inside the watch. He said it was an old trick from Mark's grandfather. The watchmaker said he used to be a tinkerer. Mark must have forgotten about it." She paused, and then she held out a small, ornate key. This was inside. He said it was the key to a box. My heart pounded in my chest. The key. It had to be for the wooden box. I snatched it from her hand, my fake smile dropping completely. "This is mine," I said, a little too loudly. "Mark wanted me to have his things," she said, her voice still calm. "But if this belongs to something you have, you should have it." She looked at me with a kind of sad pity. "I hope it helps you find what you're looking for." I didn't answer. I just held the key, my mind racing. She was right. The key had to be for the box. I felt a surge of triumph, a rush of power. I was going to win. I was going to get my life back. If you're enjoying this story, remember to like and subscribe to the channel for more chapters of this thrilling narrative. I raced home, my hands shaking as I fit the small, ornate key into the lock of the wooden box. It clicked open with a satisfying sound. I threw the lid back, my heart pounding in my ears. What would I find? Jewels? A secret bank account number? A deed to a hidden property? Inside, there was a single, neatly folded stack of papers. No jewels, no money, just papers. My triumphant smile faltered as I unfolded them. They were letters, a series of letters, handwritten by Mark, addressed to me. I started to read, my eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. The first letter was dated a year before his death. In it, he wrote about his love for me, but also his growing fear. He said he felt like I was drifting away, that I only cared about the life his money could buy. He wrote about his pain, how he missed the woman he had married, the one who was just as happy with a simple meal as she was with a fancy dinner. The next letters were more recent, written just weeks before his death. They were filled with sadness and a kind of resignation. He wrote about how he was dying, a fact he had hidden from me. He had a rare, aggressive form of cancer. He wrote about how he had wanted to tell me, but he was afraid of how I would react. He believed I would only stay with him out of obligation, not love. He wrote about his last wishes, about how he was creating the trust to ensure I would be okay, but that I would also have to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. "I hope you understand, Sarah," a line from his last letter read. "I did this because I love you. I wanted to protect you from yourself. I wanted to give you a chance to find out what really matters in life." My hands trembled, and my vision blurred with tears, not of sadness, but of shame and regret. He knew all along. He had watched me turn into this person I was, a person I didn't even recognize anymore. And instead of condemning me, he had tried to help me. He had given me a final gift, a chance to be better, a chance to change. The worthless watch, the useless box. They were not a means of punishment, but a tool for my salvation. I spent the next few days in a fog of guilt and self-loathing. I was an empty shell in a big, empty house. Every room was a ghost, a memory of a life I had taken for granted. I had sold all the things Mark had loved, the things that were truly valuable to him, just to maintain a facade of wealth. The reality of my situation was suffocating. I couldn't afford the upkeep of the house. I had no job, no skills to fall back on, and my friends from that social circle had abandoned me as soon as my status changed. I had built my entire life on a foundation of money, and now that foundation was crumbling. One afternoon, the trust administrator called. He informed me that due to my failure to maintain the property, I had missed a mortgage payment and let the garden become overgrown. The trust would be liquidating the assets. The house would be sold. I would be left with only a small portion of the remaining funds. He was strictly following Mark's wishes. He said Mark's will stipulated that if the property was not maintained, it would be sold, and the remaining funds would be used for the charities Mark had supported. I tried to argue, to plead, but my voice was weak and hollow. There was no one to help me. I had pushed everyone away. I had no one to blame but myself. The luxurious life I had so desperately clung to was being torn from my grasp. The very walls of the house seemed to be closing in on me. I realized with a sickening clarity that the life I had been so proud of, the one I had built on a lie, was gone, and I had nobody to turn to. I had laughed at Emily's grief, at Mark's sentimentality, and now the universe was laughing at me. The final humiliation came swiftly. The house was sold at a fraction of its value, and I was left with a small, pathetic sum. It was enough to rent a tiny apartment in a rundown part of the city, but it was a far cry from the life I had known. I was forced to get a job, something I hadn't had in over a decade. I was a waitress at a greasy spoon diner, my hands smelling of old coffee and stale food, my once manicured nails now chipped and broken. One afternoon, I was cleaning a table when I saw a familiar face. It was Emily, with her husband and their 2 young children. They were laughing and talking, a picture of a happy, normal family. I tried to hide behind the menu, my face burning with shame, but it was too late. She saw me. She walked over to my table, her smile fading as she took in my worn-out clothes and tired eyes. "Sarah?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine shock. I couldn't meet her gaze. "Emily," I mumbled, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't know," she said, her eyes soft with pity. "Mark's charities. They received a lot of money. The trust helped fund a new wing at the animal shelter and a new playground at the children's hospital. He would have been so happy." She paused, then her eyes landed on my hands. "What happened?" "The house, the trust. It was all gone," I said, my voice cracking. I looked up at her, my pride gone, my shame all-consuming. I was an idiot. I thought money was everything. I lost it all. Emily just stood there, looking at me, not with judgment, but with an overwhelming sense of sorrow. It was a mirror of my own emotions, all the arrogance, all the contempt I had shown her. It all came back to me in that moment. I felt the full weight of my mistakes, a weight heavier than any designer dress or fancy car. If you're finding yourself invested in Sarah's journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to catch the final chapters of this powerful story. Days turned into weeks, and my new reality became a monotonous, painful cycle. I'd wake up in my tiny, cramped apartment, the walls peeling and the floorboards creaking. I'd go to my job at the diner, serving people who were just like the person I used to be, oblivious to the world outside their bubbles of comfort. Every morning, as I put on my worn-out uniform, I felt the sharp sting of regret. I tried to contact old friends, but my calls went unanswered. They had no place for a woman who was no longer part of their exclusive world. My life had been built on a fragile foundation of social status, and without it, I had nothing. Loneliness was a cold, constant companion. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift, I was walking home when I passed a park. I saw Emily and her family. They were laughing, pushing their children on the swings, their faces aglow with simple joy. I watched them from a distance, a knot forming in my stomach. They had everything I had once had, a loving family, genuine happiness. It wasn't about the money. It was about the connections, the love, the human bonds I had so carelessly discarded. I thought about Mark. I thought about his quiet kindness, his devotion. He had tried to love me, to change me, but I had been too blind, too selfish to see it. He had left me with a final lesson, a challenge disguised as a curse, and I had failed. I had traded a loving husband and a caring family for a life of luxury, and in the end, I had lost everything. The watch I had called worthless was now a symbol of all the things I had thrown away. A few months passed, and I was slowly beginning to build a new life for myself, a life without the pretense and luxury I had once craved. I got a second job, waitressing at a different restaurant, and started saving what little money I could. I was still a long way from being okay, but I was surviving. The shame was still there, but it was slowly being replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. One afternoon, I received a phone call. It was a familiar number. Emily. I hesitated, then answered. Sarah? It's Emily, she said, her voice gentle. I was wondering how you were doing. I was stunned. After all the terrible things I had said and done to her, why would she even bother? I told her I was fine, that I was working, that I was getting by. She listened patiently. Mark wrote a letter for me too, she said after a long pause. He wrote about you. He said that you had a good heart, but that you were lost. He said to look after you, to help you if I could. He said that a true family is there for each other, even when they're at their worst. My throat tightened. He said that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He did, she said softly. He believed in you, Sarah. He knew you'd find your way back. I don't understand, I said, a tear rolling down my cheek. After all I did, after everything I said to you, he wasn't perfect, Sarah, and neither am I, she said. But we are family, and that's what Mark believed in. She told me that she had a friend who was looking for a new assistant at a local nonprofit. It was a small job, but it paid better and had a real purpose. It was a chance for me to start over, to use my organizational skills for something other than planning extravagant parties. I was speechless. I had expected judgment, anger, and condemnation, but all I received was kindness. I had been so cruel to her, but she had offered me a lifeline. I took the job. It was a world away from the glamorous life I had once known, but it was real. I was working with people who cared about making a difference. I was helping the very charities Mark had supported, the ones I had once scoffed at. I was earning my own money, building a life I could be proud of. One rainy afternoon, Emily came to visit me at my tiny apartment. She didn't have to, but she did. We sat on my worn-out couch, a simple pot of coffee between us. I thanked her for everything. I told her I was sorry for all the hurtful things I had said, for laughing at her grief, for all the mistakes I had made. It's okay, Sarah, she said, reaching for my hand. It's all in the past now. I looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time. She wasn't just Mark's sister. She was a kind, compassionate woman who had become my friend. I had been so blind, so consumed by my own selfishness, that I hadn't seen the true value in the people around me. As she was leaving, she pulled something out of her pocket. It was the old watch. "I had it completely restored," she said, a smile on her face. The watchmaker said the intricate mechanism was beautiful, and the old-fashioned design, the one that made it look so worthless, was actually what made it so unique and valuable. "It's a real piece of history, a part of our family." She handed it to me. I held it in my hand, its weight a reminder of everything I had lost and everything I had gained. The watch wasn't a punishment. It was a gift. It was a symbol of Mark's enduring love, of Emily's unwavering kindness, and of the true value of things. I had once called it worthless, but now it was a reminder that true value isn't found in what something is made of, but in the story it tells, the people it connects, and the love it represents. The watch, the house, the money, they were all just objects. The real treasure had been in front of me all along. Family, love, and a second chance. I had finally found what was truly worth keeping. If you were moved by Sarah's journey, please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We have more stories just like this one that will make you think and feel. Your support helps us create more content that matters.